Nadia learned later that some moments change a life without warning, without noise, without permission. They arrive quietly and leave nothing the same. The afternoon had started like any other. The city moved at its usual speed, traffic buzzing, people rushing with their own worries. Nadia held a small paper bag in her hand, warm with fresh food. She smiled to herself as she walked toward the office building where her husband worked. Ion had been tired lately. Long hours, late nights. She thought a surprise would bring back a little closeness they seemed to be losing. Their marriage had not been broken. It had simply grown thin in places, stretched by routine and silence. Nadia told herself that was normal. Love changed shapes over time. It didn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, almost invisible. She believed that was what they had. The building lobby smelled of coffee and cleaning liquid. She greeted the guard who knew her well and took the elevator up. As the doors opened, laughter echoed faintly down the hall. Nadia slowed her steps. She didn't want to interrupt. She planned to wait, then step in with a smile. That was when she heard Ion's name, that it wasn't loud, just clear enough. She paused near the corner, unseen. The voice belonged to a woman. Nadia didn't recognize it at first, but there was ease in the way she spoke, a comfort that made Nadia's chest tighten. The woman wasn't gossiping. She wasn't mocking. She was remembering. She talked about how Ion stayed late, even when he didn't have to. How he drank his coffee too fast when he was nervous. How he went quiet when something bothered him, pretending nothing was wrong. She laughed softly, not cruelly but warmly, like someone sharing a secret. Nadia felt her smile fade. Those were details Nadia knew, or thought she did. Hearing them from someone else felt wrong, like finding her handwriting in a stranger's notebook. The woman continued, her voice gentle, almost fond. She spoke about conversations that stretched past work, about shared thoughts, about moments of understanding. Nothing improper was said. No lines were crossed with words. But the closeness was unmistakable. Nadia stepped back, her heart pounding hard enough to hurt. She didn't wait to hear more. She didn't want proof. Her body already understood what her mind was still trying to deny. She turned and walked away, the food bag growing cold in her hand. Outside, the light felt too bright. The city sounded louder than before. Nadia sat on a bench and stared ahead, trying to slow her breathing. She told herself there must be an explanation. People talked, coworkers bonded. She was reading too much into it, but doubt had already found a home in her chest. That night, Nadia moved through the apartment like a guest in her own life. Ion came home late, tired but smiling. He kissed her forehead, thanked her for dinner. She reheated quietly. His touch felt familiar, yet distant, like a memory instead of a moment. They talked about nothing important. Work, weather, plans they might make someday. Nadia watched his face, searching for signs. He looked the same. That hurt the most. When they went to bed, Ion fell asleep quickly. Nadia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The woman's voice replayed in her mind, calm and confident. Not jealous. Not ashamed. As if she belonged somewhere she shouldn't. Nadia wondered when she had stopped being enough the next morning. She woke with a strange clarity. She didn't cry. She didn't feel angry. She felt alert, as if something inside her had woken up after a long sleep. Days passed quickly. Nadia kept herself busy. She worked, cleaned, met friends, smiled when expected. But she watched Ion closely now, not with suspicion, but with attention. She noticed the small changes she had ignored before. How he checked his phone and put it away quickly. It's how he spoke about work with care, choosing words carefully. It's how he seemed present. Yet, somewhere else at the same time, their conversations stayed polite, smooth, shallow. The deeper questions remained untouched. Like fragile glass, neither wanted to risk breaking. One evening, Nadia suggested a walk. Ion agreed easily. They walked through their neighborhood as the sun dipped low, the air cooling. Couples passed. Them, laughing, talking, holding hands. Nadia felt a quiet ache. She asked him simple things, how he was feeling. Other work was stressful, he answered calmly, reasonably. Nothing sounded wrong. She almost let it go, but the memory of that voice wouldn't leave her when they returned home. Nadia stood in the kitchen, pretending to organize dishes. Her heart beat faster. She knew this moment mattered. Not because she wanted confrontation, but because she needed honesty. "Ion," she said softly, "do you feel close to me?" He looked surprised. "Of course," he said quickly. The answer came too fast. She nodded, as if satisfied. But inside, something cracked. That night, Nadia dreamed of standing outside a closed door, hearing her own name spoken kindly from the other side. She woke with tears in her eyes. The following afternoon, she returned to the office building, not to spy, not to accuse. She told herself she just wanted clarity. She waited near the hallway again, her heart racing. The woman's voice appeared. Once more, this time closer. Nadia caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass. Professional, confident. She looked like someone who knew where she stood. Their eyes met briefly. The woman smiled politely and walked past, unaware of the storm she had started. That was when Nadia understood something painful and sharp. The danger wasn't passion, it was comfort. She went home and sat alone for a long time. When Ion returned that evening, she didn't mention the office. She didn't mention the woman. Instead, she asked a different question. "Are you happy?" She said "AIAN," paused, just for a moment. But the moment said everything. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her, truly looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time in a long while. Then he smiled gently and said, "I think so." Nadia nodded. Inside. She knew the truth was closer than ever, and once it came out, nothing would stay the same. Nadia felt the weight of that silent moment in the office long after she left. Every day after, she noticed things she had ignored for months. Little cracks in the walls of her marriage that she had assumed were normal. Ion, her husband, was the same man she had loved for years. Gentle, kind, dependable. But now he felt distant. She couldn't place it, couldn't understand it fully, but she felt it in every quiet glance, every distracted smile, every pause before he spoke. Their home, once a place of warmth, felt quiet in a different way now. The silence was heavier, full of thoughts left unspoken. Nadia tried to stay normal at first. She cooked their meals like she always did, asked about his day with genuine interest, tried to keep their routines uninterrupted. But she noticed he sometimes held back words, laughed softly at things she didn't understand, or seemed lost in thought. She didn't want to accuse him. She didn't want to confront something she wasn't sure existed. Yet the memory of that coworker's voice haunted her. Her words had been gentle, not mean, almost casual, but they carried a sense of closeness, intimacy that Nadia couldn't ignore. Every laugh, every soft tone, every moment she had overheard stayed in her mind. And it felt like a seed growing quietly, shaping the way she saw Ion. She started observing more. She noticed how he stayed late at work, often longer than necessary, sometimes calling her from the office without explanation for his extended hours. She noticed the phone he now kept face down on the table, the way he sometimes frowned at a text she couldn't see. It wasn't evidence of betrayal, she told herself, just the signs of a man under pressure. Yet, deep down, she felt a tension she couldn't name. Something was shifting, subtly but unmistakably. One evening, she tried to bridge the distance. With a plan, she suggested a small weekend getaway, just the two of them, somewhere quiet to reconnect. Ion agreed, but there was a hesitation. She noticed he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nadia's heart ached at the sight, and she realized that the problem wasn't just about distance. It was about feelings unspoken, things left to grow in shadow. She wanted closeness, laughter, shared stories that felt alive. But there seemed to be a wall she hadn't seen before. The night before their trip, Nadia decided to bring up something simple. She asked him softly, carefully, "Do you feel happy with us?" The words felt strange on her tongue, almost foreign. She didn't want to accuse, only to understand. Ion looked at her, his eyes hesitant, caught off guard. He opened his mouth, then paused, swallowed, and finally said, I think so." The hesitation was too long to be natural, and Nadia felt the truth pressing against her chest. She nodded, not wanting to push further, though her heart ached with uncertainty. She went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the space between them more acutely than ever. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind raced with memories, with questions, with a quiet voice she had overheard. During the trip, the quiet moments became louder. Nadia tried to fill them with walks, talks, laughter, but Ion remained distant. Thoughtful, occasionally distracted by his phone, by emails, by tasks he couldn't finish. Nadia noticed it in the way he held her hand differently, how he sometimes hesitated before answering her questions. She noticed how his smiles sometimes faltered, how he looked at her as if searching for something he couldn't name. She loved him still, deeply, but the unease between them had grown tangible. Every glance she shared with him carried unspoken tension. Every attempt at intimacy was careful, tentative. It was during a quiet evening by the lake, when the sun dipped low and the world was painted in gold, that Nadia found herself speaking, a truth she had avoided. "Ion," she said softly, "I feel something has changed between us." He didn't respond immediately. He looked at the water, then back at her, eyes shadowed. "I know," he said finally, his voice low. "I've felt it too. I didn't want to hurt you." The honesty hung in the air, fragile and tremulous, but it was there. Nadia's chest tightened, part relief, part heartbreak. She realized they had both been dancing around the same truth, pretending it didn't exist. The days that followed were a delicate dance of questions and half-answers. Nadia wanted to know everything, yet she feared the answers. She wanted to confront the reality, yet she didn't want to break what remained. Every conversation with Ion became measured, careful. She noticed the way he avoided certain topics, the subtle signs of regret in his tone, the longing in his eyes for something he couldn't define. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't unfaithful physically, but there had been a closeness with someone else, emotional, intimate, inappropriate for boundaries. Nadia felt the weight of the words she had overheard, the warmth in the coworker's tone, the familiarity she wasn't part of. It wasn't a betrayal in the traditional sense, but it cut deeper than she could have imagined. One evening, she asked him again, softly, carefully, was there someone else? Ion's face changed. He avoided her gaze, ran a hand through his hair, exhaled slowly. "Not exactly, no," he said, "but I shared parts of myself I shouldn't have. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It just happened." Nadia felt her heart ache. That was the truth she had feared. Emotional connection, feelings, shared that belonged to her alone, had crossed invisible lines. She didn't feel anger, not immediately, but a hollow ache spread in her chest. She realized trust was fragile, easy to bend, and much harder to rebuild. The days turned into weeks. Nadia tried to understand, tried to forgive, tried to rebuild closeness. She watched Ion, trying to see the man she knew, the man she loved. She noticed how he lingered when he spoke to her, the hesitation in his hands when reaching for hers, the careful thoughtfulness in his words. He seemed aware now, painfully aware of the distance he had allowed. Every small gesture, every small apology, every attempt at honesty was a thread she could hold on to. She loved him, yes, but it was no longer enough to assume that love alone would fix everything. They needed effort, openness, and courage. During this time, Nadia also reflected on herself. She remembered moments she had taken for granted, times she had assumed closeness would always remain, and realized she had drifted too. She recognized her own need for attention, validation, and warmth that she hadn't voiced. Ion's emotional wandering had a reason neglect, albeit unintentional, had allowed space for someone else to step in. It wasn't a justification, but a realization that relationships were a shared responsibility. And silence sometimes carried the heaviest weight. Nadia began to approach him differently. She no longer assumed closeness. She asked, listened, watched. Every moment was a test of truth, a fragile opportunity to rebuild trust. When he offered his hand, she took it, but cautiously. When he spoke openly, she listened deeply. She didn't laugh at jokes automatically. She wanted to feel the genuine connection again. Little by little, fragments of what they once had returned. But the shadow of the coworker's words, the echo of familiarity she had never shared, remained. Too changed. He became more aware, more present, more careful with words and boundaries. He realized that emotional intimacy could be just as powerful as physical connection, and that sharing it with the wrong person was a betrayal, no matter how innocent it seemed at first. He sought Nadia's forgiveness not with excuses, but with actions. He shared his thoughts, listened to hers, and tried to rebuild the emotional bridge they had lost. Nights became moments of reflection. Nadia lay awake thinking about what had happened, what could have been avoided, and what they had to rebuild. She realized that love was not static, wasn't something to take for granted. Every day, every conversation, every shared smile or touch was a choice. And choices mattered. She also understood that emotional closeness with others, if allowed, could undermine even the deepest bonds. The realization stung, but it also awakened her to the importance of connection, tension, and presence. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a quiet evening when Ion simply took her hand and said, "I don't want to lose us." His voice was soft, earnest, full of regret and hope. Nadia felt a wave of emotion, part relief, part longing, part sorrow for the moments lost. She realized that forgiveness would not be immediate, but it was possible. Trust could be rebuilt, slowly, carefully, day by day. The love she felt for him hadn't disappeared, but it had to be nurtured, strengthened, and protected. Nadia also learned to accept complexity. A marriage was not simple. People were not perfect. Mistakes happened. Boundaries sometimes blurred. What mattered was acknowledgement, honesty, and effort. She didn't want to punish him, and she didn't want to forget. She wanted understanding and healing. And slowly, with patience, they began that process together. Weeks turned into months. The space between them, once full of doubt, began to shrink. They laughed together again, shared stories, touched lightly, without hesitation, and rebuilt routines that reminded them of their bond. Yet Nadia carried the lesson of that day in the office with her, always the reminder that emotional boundaries mattered, that silence could be dangerous, and that love required vigilance as well as tenderness. Every glance, every conversation, every quiet moment between them now held new meaning. Nadia had learned to look, truly look, at the man she loved and see him fully. Not just the reflection of what she wanted him to be. The months after Nadia and Ion began to rebuild their marriage were filled with quiet, sometimes painful lessons. They were learning each other again, like explorers rediscovering a land they had once known intimately but had left unattended. Every day was deliberate, every word, every gesture, every conversation mattered. Nadia realized that healing wasn't a single event, a dramatic confession, or an apology. It was a series of small, meaningful actions repeated until trust could breathe again. Ion became aware of his emotional boundaries in a way he never had before. He noticed every lingering look, every joke that hinted too much familiarity, every conversation that drew him closer to someone else's emotional world instead of Nadia's. He started talking about work openly, not hiding details or waiting to answer her questions with clipped replies. He asked for her opinion, her advice, and, most importantly, her feelings. The simple act of including her in the small decisions of daily life began to bridge the space that had grown between them. Nadia, too, had changed. She had become more attentive, not controlling, but mindful. She noticed subtle shifts in Ion's mood, moments when he seemed distracted, times when he needed space. She listened without judgment, and when she spoke from her heart. She asked questions not to accuse, but to understand. She realized that connection was active, not passive. That love was a choice renewed every day, and she was willing to fight for it. One evening, they decided to take a quiet walk through the park near their apartment. The air was cool, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh earth. Children played at a distance. Couples walked hand in hand, and the world felt alive and simple. Nadia felt a twinge of fear in her chest, a quiet worry that something unsaid might break the fragile closeness they had regained. She looked at Ion, walking slightly ahead, his hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the path. He turned to her and smiled gently. "I've missed this," he said. His voice held something more than words. It held awareness, regret, and hope. "I've missed it too," Nadia replied softly. Her hand brushed against his. He stopped and looked at her fully, his eyes searching hers. "I know I hurt you," he said. "Even if I didn't act badly, I let you feel alone." "That was my fault." Nadia nodded, feeling tears rise, but she held them back. "I know," she said. "But we're here now, can start over. Carefully, yes, but truly." Over the next weeks, small moments built the foundation for something new. Breakfasts shared without hurry. Laughter returned to the dining table. Conversations stretched late into the evening, and long walks became a ritual. Every time Nadia spoke, she noticed Ion's full attention. The way he leaned slightly forward, listened without interrupting, and responded with care. And Ion, for his part, made small gestures that spoke volumes. A cup of tea waiting for her in the morning, a hand gently brushing her hair from her face. A whispered, "I love you," when words weren't necessary, but felt essential. The coworker, Lena, remained in the background. Nadia learned to acknowledge the existence of her, without letting it define her feelings. She understood that boundaries were essential, not as a punishment, but as a safeguard for the relationship she wanted to nurture. Ion had learned, too. The line between casual familiarity and emotional intimacy was sharp, and once crossed, even accidentally, it could scar. He kept his distance without resentment, fully committed to repairing what had been fragile. One night, Nadia reflected quietly as she watched Ion asleep beside her. She remembered the day she had overheard. The office conversation, the warmth in Lena's tone, the familiarity that had made her feel invisible. The memory still stung, but it no longer controlled her. It had been a lesson, harsh yet valuable. Love, she realized, was not just about loyalty when life was easy. It was about presence, tension, courage, and renewal when life was difficult. The first anniversary after that difficult period arrived quietly. Ion surprised Nadia with a simple dinner at home. He cooked her favorite meal, set the table with candles, and left a small note next to her plate. "Thank you for staying," it read. Nadia smiled, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. They ate together, talking about their favorite memories from the past year. The moments that had challenged them, and the laughter they had shared. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Nadia felt completely seen as weeks turned into months. Their relationship strengthened further. They discovered new ways to connect. They started sharing small secrets again, the kind that had once made them feel intimate and alive. They planned short trips, explored the city, discovered quiet cafes, watched sunsets, and laughed at little things that had been overlooked before. Every moment, no matter how ordinary, became meaningful. The simple presence of one another, without distraction, was a gift they both cherished. Nadia also learned to forgive, not just Ion, but herself. She realized that love could be imperfect, that mistakes didn't always mean the end. and that patience and understanding could heal deep wounds. She had felt jealousy, hurt, and fear, but she had also discovered strength, resilience, and clarity. She understood that a relationship was a living thing, needing care, attention, and honesty to thrive. Ayaan, for his part, became more expressive with his emotions. He no longer assumed Nadia would know how he felt. He told her, expressed gratitude, affection, and admiration. He sought to make her feel cherished, not just in moments of crisis, but in the ordinary hours of life. Nadia noticed this, and slowly her own heart opened again, fully, without hesitation. The couple also learned to communicate better. Small disagreements no longer escalated into long silences. Instead, they talked through misunderstandings immediately, with patience and empathy. They had learned the value of words and the danger of unspoken feelings. Every time they navigated a conflict successfully, the bond between them grew stronger. They were learning a kind of love that was not naive, but deep, mature, and enduring. One afternoon, they sat together on their balcony, sipping tea. The city below buzzed, but here there was quiet. Nadia rested her head on Ayan's shoulder. "Do you remember the first time I overheard you?" she asked softly. Ayan tensed briefly, then relaxed. "Yes," he admitted. "I was afraid you would never forgive me, that the distance was permanent." Nadia smiled gently. "I almost didn't," she said. "But we worked through it, and I think we're stronger now." Ayan kissed the top of her head. "We are," he said. "I promise to never take us for granted again." Nadia felt warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. Enough to know that they had survived the storm. Enough to know that love could endure. And enough to believe in the power of healing together. Their life didn't return to exactly how it had been. That was impossible. The shadow of what had been overheard, what had been felt, lingered as a reminder. But the memory no longer held power to harm. Instead, it became a lesson, a warning, and a guide. They treated each other with more care, spoke more openly, and celebrated the ordinary moments with gratitude. Over time, they started planning for the future, again quietly, confidently. Dreams they had paused were resumed. Conversations about children, travel, and shared projects happened naturally. There was laughter in the home once more, a laughter that was easy and unguarded. The bond they had almost lost was now deeper, not fragile, but resilient. Nadia realized that love was not about perfection. It was about choosing each other repeatedly, even after mistakes, misunderstandings, and emotional distance. She learned that true intimacy required courage, honesty, and vulnerability. She understood that even emotional closeness with another could be forgiven if the commitment to each other was restored with care and consistency. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a quiet street, Nadia felt a wave of gratitude. She thought about the difficult days, the moments of doubt, the silent pain, and realized that all of it had shaped them. It had forced honesty, reflection, and growth. She looked at Ayan, his hand warm in hers, his eyes meeting hers fully, and she felt love in a way that was deeper than simple happiness. It was enduring, tested, and real. They returned home, the city lights twinkling around them. Nadia paused at the door, taking a deep breath. She realized that healing didn't end, it was ongoing. Every day they would continue to nurture the bond they had almost lost. Every day they would make the choice to see, hear, and understand each other. And every day they would remember the lessons of trust, attention, and emotional presence. As they settled into their home, Nadia felt a quiet certainty. They were not perfect. They had faced disappointment, silence, and almost heartbreak. But they had survived. They had rebuilt what mattered most. And in that quiet resilience, they found a love that was stronger, more aware, and beautifully real. Nadia finally understood that the moments that left her speechless, the words she had overheard, the subtle betrayals of attention had been necessary. They had awakened her to truth, to vigilance, and to the depth of emotional connection. Without that moment, without the discomfort and heartbreak, she might never have realized the power of choice, the value of honesty, and the meaning of commitment.